So go, Barbara.
Okay, so let's get started.
Just put it on speakerphone.
There was a lot of material out there for review, and I think the most
She's
useful
talking back.
This says
was the
2 new
city
voicemails.
of Whitefish. If everyone looked at the project documents, those were incredibly useful. If you didn't look at them, please look at them before the next meeting. But Auckland and Rita also in the meantime sent us answers to some, well, sort of answers to some questions in these documents that are gonna be maybe picked up at the end of the meeting. I've sent a request to our council saying, I think Auckland and Rita meant for you to keep these, the committee members to keep them. They also sent us, for comparison purposes, the SBR preliminary design documents. And those are very helpful in terms of figuring out sizes, configurations, that sort of thing, of what we might do either on our property, current wastewater treatment facility, or, you know, at a new site. And I think that you will find that the materials they sent, the flow variations, robustness and resiliency, startup, and the Idaho Springs case study give a lot of comfort to the questions that have been raised among our group about salinity levels, about how does startup proceed, about what happens if you're offline for a couple days. You know, it's all good stuff. Now that wouldn't obviously send us bad stuff, but but it is, I found it very reassuring. We also have in the packet, we talked about, you know, how do we get at what it costs to run the current system versus what Aqua Narita, Aqua Aerobic are predicting for the costs to run their system. And one of the shortcomings is that our usage of electric, water, chemicals, etc., is not broken out by treatment type. So we have, you know, the whole wastewater treatment facility, the cost of electricity. What we have from Aqua is the cost of electricity for their piece of the treatment.
Right.
Right. So,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
yeah, so what Whitefish brings to us is they gave us power use per day for the entire system. And I did a spreadsheet, if you can bring that up, and you have it in your packet also. Comparing
This one, okay, yeah.
the current system.
Yep.
I'm not very good at spreadsheets, so this took me forever. You better appreciate it.
We do.
Here. And here, I'm gonna replace it because the bottom, like 5 got cut off when I printed the first one.
Okay.
Take one, pass it down.
Yes, man. This one you can try.
Yep.
This looks like really useful.
Yeah, I hope it will be.
So this one
No,
is,
this is-
no, that was
No,
it.
not that
That
one.
was-
So this is, it's
Looks
to replace, that's to replace whatever you have in your
Yeah.
packet. Like.
So
like
X this one. Yeah, here, I'll take
Pass
it.
it this way. It's like-
Whoops. It's all right, don't keep them all. Slow. Okay,
Maybe on clock.
all right. So
You see how fast Donna was there to cross out.
oh, yeah,
So
I
the
moved
current
fast.
column B is us.
Is us now, yes.
That's useful.
We don't have,
What?
So
Wow,
Mark, would you need a larger buffer size than that, what they're proposing? If we have 500,000 gallons now, they're proposing 300? Do you need more than that?
no, I don't
Okay.
think so.
Okay.
You notice with an SBR, there's 0.
Right.
Yeah,
and that is meant to be zero, it's not unknown, it's zero. Is that right?
If an SBR, you don't need to have an equalization tank ahead of.
Okay, thank you.
Your equalization tank presently serves a couple of purposes. It levels the flow through your type of treatment plant that you have, but it also you have that fine screen that is very important that it gets a very regular flow rate, because if you don't have that good screening, you have a failure at the back end of the plant.
I
Okay,
thought that too, but then I had a question. When you look at their typical SBR configuration that's in your packet near the end,
Right.
and it shows flow equalization basin.
That is on the discharge.
The post,
Yeah, that's, at Berlin, you had that little tank out there that
Yeah.
then you feed to the filters.
filters,
That's-
okay,
Cause it
So
comes,
that's
it comes out
supposed-
of an SBR in a splash
okay.
and you feed it to the filter at a regular, continuous rate.
so,
So that's the post EQ tank
Yes,
in this, okay.
So how do you want to negotiate this? Do you want to go through this or are we're just gonna try to?
No, I think we should go through this. I think this is probably the heart of what I hope to accomplish. So we're looking currently, we have a design of average of 1.5 million gallons per day. And what we want to do regardless is improve that design flow. Average.
that's not an editorial comment. I don't think.
So where there are blank spaces, it's 0 or not available, not applicable.
Usually it's not applicable unless I have a question.
Okay,
But then we get down into aerobic digester number 18. And I'm assuming with Aqua Narita, we still need the digesters to handle the sludge.
absolutely.
So the question is whether the existing ones we have are sufficient.
I would probably, take that back. I was gonna say you would use the same size sludge reactor, digester for an SBR or a Narita system, but I may be wrong with that. So
Can you explain, Barbara, excuse me for interrupting. How many digesters presently are on in the plant?
We have it's a two-stage aerobic digester for handling the sludge, but first you have an anoxic tank that's 20,000 gallons, so there's should say first and second stage tanks at 125,000 gallons each, so that might be a place where we don't have enough.
But so of those first and second stage tanks, you have two,
We have
there's
two,
two.
yeah,
So the total is a 250,000 gallons.
yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And that is not an asset that Narita
Provide.
provides, and we wouldn't be purchasing that from them, so forth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's
Do
funny.
they not
that-
have to size it? They don't advise?
they would. If I were designing it, they would tell me how much sludge they would produce and I'd make an estimate of a 30-day digester that would hold that flow rate. But it's not, you put the what's called the waste sludge from the Narita system or the SBRs or the oxidation ditches, whichever type of activated sludge you have. You put that in a reactor and you keep aerating it in an aerobic digester. And then periodically you turn that off and you let it settle
Settle.
and decant off a supernatant, which goes back to the head of the treatment plant. So you size it, hold that in mind.
Well, should give them the package anyway.
And my sense is in the, given my layman explaining that the correct column D, Aqua process, it accelerates that whole process.
My understanding is that the thickening portion, I mean, the mass has to be the same no matter what kind of process you have,
Right,
no matter what.
but it just
The
happens.
mass of microorganisms that you're going to create to eat the sewage is gonna be the same. It's a matter of whether it's denser or less dense, and that gets to the tank sizing.
Okay.
And I think the Narada system touts its denser sludge so that maybe its tank its final digestion tank doesn't need to be as big.
So there's
But
economy.
here, they don't say any tank size at all, which throws me a little bit.
Yeah,
And maybe they're saying that it would be the same as the SBR. I can tell you as an old operator, you can't have enough sludge tank size, so the bigger the better.
And that tank size you're talking about is the same as the aerobic digester, is that correct?
That aerobic digester is what I'm talking about.
Right.
The other tanks are separate.
Yeah.
The digester is where the beginning of the sludge handling side of things, rather than the water treatment side of things.
So is that a follow-up question we need to go back to Narita about?
yes. Yes, I don't see anything in there. Now that's the preliminary design for that. Maybe it's.
Well, here, I just pulled a random page in the back of the, I mean, there's a whole section on the aerobic digester. Page 6 of 13 in one of the last handouts.
That's in the SBR or in, yeah.
No, this is the process design, that's at the SBR.
Is that, what does the front page look like? So.
That's in this process.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So,
As opposed to this one.
no, it's in that one. It's in that one.
That one.
Oh,
That's what I'm looking at.
Oh, I
That's,
thought you were
that's,
looking at this one.
yeah, is it, yes, that's all SBR, the whole thing.
That's just SBR.
All right. So
This
then we
is
gotta-
Does Daphne have the ability to have those?
No, I could not send them.
Are you talking about the size of the digester tanks?
yeah,
For the Aqua Narita.
It gives, Brock and Rita,
yeah,
I don't know if they gave it, I know in the SBR, it's like 78
Yeah,
by
there's a-
90 by 21.
Yeah, there's a number in there, but it's like, we're just trying to fill in a blank on a spreadsheet here.
So you said page 13 and 13. is that what this
This is
It's not really what we're looking for. I read the wrong one.
Okay,
yeah.
I got Sam. I'm
They
kind of
have
spinning
the
here.
sludge buffer and I don't really understand what a sludge buffer is.
I think that has to do with the growth of the granules. Where they, I think that's maybe the creation of the granules. I'm not 100% sure.
I think what we're looking for is in earlier documents than what we have in front of us. It might be in the whitefish stuff,
Oh, the whitefish.
or in the stuff, the materials that they sent us before for us. You're asking about the digester volume, right?
Yeah,
I don't think they told us what we need for digester. They did tell us our sludge would be comparable.
It's not in this one that they gave
What
us
we're
in October.
creating.
here's what they were saying about that sludge buffer, it's being a small
Yeah,
tank.
yeah.
And they call it a thickening step. So that's prior to going to the digester.
Okay, okay. So that's a big question. That's all about-
and the question about the power used per day.
Yeah.
I would think they'd be able to estimate what their power use would be for their equipment I understand it wouldn't be for the entire
Oh,
plant.
they did. It's on the
It's,
spreadsheet.
it's in your,
We just don't have
And
our-
just lower on 20.
Yeah.
well, no, actually down on
Ours on
row
the table
27,
that
what,
we
what,
I'm talking about line number 19.
if you go down to 27, it's got numbers in every column, what are the
Oh.
differences?
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
On line 27 in your spreadsheet,
Yeah.
what's,
See, there
are
it
those
says,
numbers comparable, like you have plus,
And then-
double plus?
but here-
I know,
Yeah, the double pluses are because we don't know how much power is used elsewhere. Like for the headworks, or the,
Is the
whatever.
usage in
Because
kilowatt
ours is for
hours?
the entire plant.
yes,
Yeah, and
It
can we,
all.
so can we split it out to make it comparable to these numbers, or is that not possible?
Well, and
The way we meter, we just meter it as right on the transformer, so we know exactly what's being used in the plant.
For the entire operation?
It's like building, solids handling, et cetera.
No
so
sub meter.
this is kilowatt hours usage
Yeah.
for the entire,
yeah,
I think what Barbara did is she just took the total for the year, divided it up by 365, and you got
That's
the
right.
daily.
that's right. So I could compare apples to apples. And, but what we do have is the whitefish.
Barbara, before we go on, so line 13
Yeah,
and 19 say the same thing?
no,
No,
13 is the power used per day for the actual treatment system. The treatment tank,
okay,
whether it's an SBR tank. Or an Aqua Narita AGS tank.
okay.
So it's treatment tank.
okay, and then 19 is the whole facility?
19 is the aerobic digester for the SBR. 27 is the whole facility for our facility, but we know that when you add up the power for the SBR and the AGS, you don't have total power needs to run the plant. You have the power needs for the equalization basin, for the, where else? The treatment tank, the post-equalization tank. In some cases for the SBR, the aerobic digester. And that's it.
So we haven't proven in if the SBR or the Narita would consume as much or less than,
Well,
or possibly more than.
No,
so
Is that
line,
correct?
You
line
haven't, but you
29,
can start to guess at it.
line 29 gives you an idea of how total power use would relate.
Yes,
Because that column C is in the realm of column or of cell 27B. It
Right,
gets greater,
6% more or so, right,
yes.
okay,
but you don't
That's
have a
for
comparable number for
sequencing.
AGS.
No, that's for a sequencing batch reactor. These pre-designed out in Montana.
Whitefish.
Yeah, whitefish place. So it's interesting to look at that and compare it with our current total power use.
right.
Now you've got greater capacity, but not that much more.
How much of a factor is climate?
Yeah.
Well, Montana's a very different climatic situation in here.
Well,
Well, so electricity rates might be a factor too.
well, it's, but
For
the,
consumption.
I don't know about that, but the only thing that comes to mind is when you're pumping oxygen in to feed the bugs, there's less oxygen in the air in Montana than there is here at sea level. But it's in terms of the scope of things, I think it's a very small difference, you know, and that you wouldn't really be able to calculate a very major difference in the cost of electricity to pump air into the systems, any of these systems. I just have a hard time believing that it would make that much of a difference, especially at this tabletop level of discussion.
Now, one question I had is the whitefish, excuse me, numbers include the main lift pumps. And I don't know the numbers you gave us, does that include?
I don't know if they're talking, when they talk main lift pumps, or they talking the main lift station that's on the same site. Like for us, all of our force mains manifold in and go right into the headworks. So I don't know if that includes like pumps, our equivalent to pump station 4 and 8. I mean, we have the data on those because they're not on the same site, but
They're delivering
yeah,
the inflow to the manifold.
yeah, it's just a matter of how they're configured. I don't know. You know, topography may benefit them a little bit better than what it does for us.
Does all
So
that
actually-
flow go directly into your screens, or does it go to the EQ tank first and then get pumped into the screen?
Goes to the 5 mil first, goes through 5 mil first in to the EQ tank, so it goes to EQ, or it goes in, comes up. Through the 5 millimeter screen into the EQ tank, and then the EQ pumps pull it out, go to the 2 millimeter screen
Okay,
and.
so if anything, it'd be analogous to those pumps in the EQ tanks.
So that's what I was thinking about. I didn't know how they're labeling lift pumps, as if they're EQ pumps or if they're actual lift stations.
Yeah, they're probably talking. In this instance, more like your pump stations feeding.
Yeah.
And it just probably is at the treatment plant.
Yeah.
The end of this gravity comes to it. But. It, you know, your second pumps that are in the EQ tanks, you know, would need to be taken into consideration if you want to compare. So you compare both of your last two pump stations to the treatment plant, plus your EQ tank. That electricity would probably be equivalent to what they say is their influent pumps.
Ours would be higher than, because we're basically neck and neck with Whitefish.
Mm.
And I can tell you that both those pump stations run pretty much all the time. And they're the two biggest pump stations in the system. 8 probably shuts off a lot more than 4.
So if you
Oh.
take out line 30, that 2,685 kilowatt hours,
That's a good point. They did separate that out.
yeah.
So that is kilowatt hours for
Those are all,
2685.
yeah, I got tired of them.
All right,
Yeah.
We'll let you off.
yeah, well, I'm not sure. Is
They're all power numbers.
that a motion?
And so they break out separately the pre-treatment, the headworks and the grit removal. And those are all kilowatt hours per day.
Austin, may I take this minute to ask a question of you? Then what's just come up is, I'm trying to think about if this plant is fitted with any other equipment other than what is presently in the plant. Will that affect the pumps that are installed in pump station 4 and pump station number 8?
If you switch technologies,
Correct. That's in a sense what I'm asking. In other words, is there additional, will there be?
you're still gonna pump to an EQ tank.
Okay, so there's no such thing, we don't need to be worried about pairing. The changes that are made in a plant to that system, which is actually pushing material towards the plant.
Well, you'll probably get into a little bit more detail, because like I printed off the email from Bill. And that had the detail of like if you were to build an SBR plant, what the total cost would be, the estimate. I don't know if you got that far yet.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this scenario, like if you were to build a brand new plant and it's what Bill assumed is that you would be building it offsite, you would have a brand new headworks, digester, et cetera, which you could potentially be changing elevations, obviously, if you're moving it. In the current configuration, I think it's assuming that your EQ tank stays exactly where it's at and your headworks stays exactly where it's at. So the only thing changing is you're doing your treatment process, which would be your SBR if you're moving it.
Okay.
So everything else stays the same, essentially from the headworks back to the collection system, but you're just changing your treatment process. So it would be no issue.
There would
If
be
you
no-
put an SBR there, you would not have the EQ tank.
I thought, well, maybe I'm thinking of the other process.
The other
Because the other process, they still kept the EQ.
Yes.
And given what you said about a new treatment plant at a higher elevation, I'm assuming that's a new location which would require some kind of pumping to the higher elevation
That'd be
to
additional
get,
pump.
like,
And
after the
that
headworks
section.
to the treatment, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to factor that in as well.
Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, you still have two pump stations that have to pump somewhere. It's just a matter of they're pumping to the existing location or they're pumping to a new location.
No, well, I don't, sorry, I'm asking silly questions here. I'm gonna be at my limits of understanding all day. But,
I can
but given what you just said, working from pump station 4 and 8
Mhm.
through the headworks, that delivers the inflow to the process.
Mhm.
And if I understand what you just said, if you change the reactor that would process the waste, and we move it to a new location, as you suggested,
Yeah,
that presumably would be at a higher elevation, which would require additional pumping to get it there.
depending on where you're at, yeah.
Okay.
You're still pumping at the end of the day.
Right,
Got it right.
right. So there's an additional cost for something that we've never done before.
Those pump stations, those last two pump stations would have to have modified pumps if it went to
Could it,
another location.
could they push it through all these things and back up to the next thing?
Are you saying like if you kept. In your scenario, you're keeping the headworks of the EQ tank, but moving your processing piece?
Right,
Yeah,
You,
according to what you were saying.
I don't,
Like if you built it, we were flying over the landscape on the other side of Freeman Highway. If we were to build up on the preferred elevation up on the dune or over on the other side of the canal or whatever. You're talking pushing all that stuff from the elevation where it is in the headworks.
I don't think I've ever seen it to where you would have headworks and equalization, if you needed equalization, ahead of. Meaning like you would have to have, 600, 700, 800 feet of pipe to get to your treatment side.
Yeah. There you go. That's what I'm
Kind
asking.
of a wasted scenario.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Usually it's coupled together, so and
So the elevation that we gain for this would have to be on site. It would be putting it higher. But keeping it on the Howard Seymour patch of land.
or you move the entire thing. You
Okay.
move the entire process.
Alright.
That's what Bill put in his, he threw a number out there. And
Okay,
it was, what was it, 20 to 22 million?
yeah.
To essentially rebuild, and that includes UV treatment, it includes a brand new headworks. It's just a number he threw off the wall.
Okay.
Roughly 20 to 22 million, but factor in, that number is to build a new plant. You still have to deconstruct your existing plant, return to, where it was prior, or any sort of pump station modification. Cause you already have the ability, you have two force mains that are going to the headworks now. So the question is, could you modify so that instead of 4 and 8 pumping to the headworks, which then goes in the EQ tank, could you take 4 and utilize the force main coming from, or use 8, which is the one on American Legion? Can you pump 8 through the force main that 4 is pumping to the headworks? And then make 4, which is the one next to Earl's house, just a large pump station with a very large wet well that becomes your massive regional pump.
your primary driver to the treatment.
If the option was a new site, are there potential locations for that have been identified?
There's at least one, right?
Yeah, there's one.
Okay,
Where is it?
Down the street from Earl.
His backyard.
It's buffered on all sides. It's buffered on the back by, it's not industrial zoning, but it's zoned differently, but it's an industrial complex on the back. And it's buffered by 66 feet of right of way on one side and probably 200 feet of right of way on the other side.
Where, I don't know.
It's
where
Robert
it's-
Kennedy speeds.
Oh, near the Del Dot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, Freeman Highway Bridge.
Yeah, yeah.
Freeman Highway.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 3.7
I,
acres.
I've looked at that, just walked it and was thinking about putting batch reactors there or something.
And it's higher.
Yeah,
Yeah, significantly higher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a nice site, however.
Yeah.
You've got to think about handling sludge,
correct.
and
That's the biggest issue.
I think that would be a real problem at that site.
The argument that you would have is if you don't have to worry about sludge, because you're pumping under the county agreement,
Yeah.
then that takes that piece out of the question. You still have you still have biosolids handling. these. But what I'm saying is that if you're hauling liquid like we are today,
Yeah,
then you don't have to worry about it theoretically.
Yeah, it comes directly out of the digester.
Yeah, or-
Tank truck.
right, or you have your sludge handling at a different location, or remote,
Yeah, that,
and you call to it, and you walk.
Because from a permitting perspective, if you're still, under this circumstance, you're still most likely going to be utilizing an outfall. Well, you're basically just switching the side of whatever outfall you're doing. So from a permitting perspective, I don't see that Denrick or the EPA would view that as a bad thing.
You're saying switching the side of the canal, you're saying
Yeah.
the water, the receiving water body.
You're
I
still
agree.
same receiving water body, you're just
Even,
switching your
even
outfall.
at the almost exact same point, right?
Almost.
yeah,
Um. Yeah, like I said before, the sludging is the tail that wags the dog.
I mean, obviously,
And
you'll
I
have,
mean, that's where the propensity of odors, generate.
oh,
things
I
like
mean,
that.
no matter what you do, if you tell somebody you're putting a wastewater treatment plant in their backyard, you'll have people pissed off, so.
So-
That's
so
a
to
political,
speak.
yeah, that's
I
a
guarantee it.
a political
Yeah.
decision.
yeah.
Jack Lingo will be the first one in line, probably next to
He has his eye on the property.
No, they own all the land, they're developing everything nearby.
Yeah.
But just across the Freeman Highway.
You were mentioning that
Yeah,
Bill,
I wonder
were you talking
about
Bill Laporte.
the
Bill
library, the White
mentioned
Pond.
a price, and I wasn't here for that, I guess. He said,
It was in the email.
oh, I'm sorry.
He said,
20 to 22, I think. No, no,
Yeah, I'm curious to know what he is.
I don't know if you.
Is that email in our packet?
No.
the quote, it just references everything that's in the sheet that you provided.
I see.
So when you go back down, you can see, he included the line item, but I don't think he ever included an estimated cost. So it's kind of hodgepodge. You gotta go back to the document, that's the confidential document. You go through it on the backside, you can see what he quoted out, and then he gave a rough number, a figure to it.
Okay. The one thing that I'm sure he hasn't had time to put together is the possibility of the use of existing tankage.
Right.
You know, he's got a price that is probably all new tankage, and I if I were the design engineer, there's a lot of tankage there that is high enough, could be added to, could be taken care of buildings, existing blowers, existing equipment that certainly could be reused. It's in perfectly good shape.
The tanks are the biggest question, because you have a hodgepodge of concrete, probably stemming back from the 70s to 80s. The early 2000s, so
Right.
it's not all the same, because when they did the expansion, I believe all those tanks are new, but the old.
Does the
Old
expansion
oxidation.
include the oxidation ditch?
Oxidation dish
It was
existed
originally-
previously,
Yes, okay.
but they added to it, so with
Oh, okay,
wise.
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but I mean, that would be, you know, your first thing the structural engineer would check is to see the status of, you know, what kind of coatings would need to be put over existing concrete to make it last if you were going to reuse it, things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. We have in the whitefish package. If people look at it, the one that talks about the, it wasn't a handout.
It was a link in
A link.
a message that Austin sent.
And
There was a lot in it.
And it's-
A while ago.
Thank you.
Swank Enterprises breaks down all their costs, which to me is a gem. It's got costs for, you know, site concrete structures. So now it's a couple of years old. It's 11/19/19. So. they
Once
cost-
upon a time, we used to say a concrete thing cost $100 a held gallon. I think it's probably $250 a held gallon now.
Yes. They
Is
said
that
the
still
reactor
one thing?
basin.
A
Mat
hundred, no.
slab would be 236,000.
May I take a look at that?
Yeah, yeah, please.
So how can I get a hold of this?
The link that Austin sent us all at the last meeting.
Not my email.
So it was,
Sorry,
it was on the 14th, I'll forward it to you.
Okay,
Please, yes. thank
Yeah.
you.
there
So,
are project documents on the left side of the page.
yeah, this is great.
You can literally pull everything,
Yeah,
because they bid it out separately.
the wastewater facility improvement, right? No, wastewater,
Top.
top. Okay.
Ah,
And
Yeah,
then-
you're on it.
Down in the
Scroll
bottom, there's a
down.
set of documents.
Yep. See the project.
Project documents.
Project documents right there. Click on that.
And then there's a whole pile.
Oh, wonderful.
So Barbara, I'm looking at this and thinking this spreadsheet that you've worked so hard on. And I don't mean to be critical.
Okay,
It's a nice framework, but we still, it seems to me we still have a bunch of blanks we need to fill in before we can really evaluate anything.
yes.
Um,
And some of them I couldn't read I got a package from GMB that was the current wastewater treatment plant and I couldn't read parts of it. And it appeared that something was missing from it.
That's the one you followed up with today.
Yeah, yeah. So things like, do we have post-equalization tank now? No, okay.
so I'm curious how we make sense of all this. Like, I mean, I gotta say, this sheet that we have with the electricity usage
Yeah.
Yeah,
the last 2 years in our plant seems to me, I mean, I don't, until we get a better, at least maybe you guys can make sense of it. I can't really make sense of how these other two columns on Barbara's spreadsheet factor out, but that's a lot of money over a decade or over the life of the plant. That's a lot of money. I don't know, what are the possibilities based on what you guys know, the folks who understand this better than I do? How much can we save by going with one of these other approaches? Never mind all the other possibilities, just energy usage.
well, you have to keep in mind one thing, this is something, the rates have changed from one year to the other. I believe there was a rate increase from 22 to 23, am I correct, Austin?
The rate increase for the next 5 years.
Correct. So, and what percentage is accountable for that?
The increase was 2.3% was the increase. I have to go back and try and run, I believe it's 2.3.
That's why I did it in kilowatt hours per.
Yeah,
day,
and
Because
that's
that's
what you're doing.
independent of the price of the
Exactly
power.
right.
But when you look at the power use per day of the SBR technology versus the Aqua Narita technology, that's dramatic.
Yeah, it is.
It is. But that's for the treatment tank, right?
Yeah.
That's my fear is that
That's not-
until we have all the other pieces that
No.
plug into that.
And even if
the
you
whole
go down to
process-
line 27,
Yeah, I'm surprised by
It's-
that.
it's 25%.
Yeah.
I couldn't argue it. I don't know. I mean, it's a factor of 3 or 4. And
Mhm.
it strikes me as a little bit out of whack.
Well, but if, I mean, if you look at the first row, or whatever, row 2, we have different volumes, so the two. The C and D are the same volume, but the first one is. What? 2/3 of it, is it?
Yeah, that's the current plan.
Right,
that's correct.
so,
But I mean, just the comparisons between SBR and
yeah,
the Narita, SBR strikes me as they're in the yellow.
what's the
That's what-
80%? What does that refer to in the last column?
What line are you, please?
That's
Line 13.
13. That's 80% of capacity.
An operation.
Yeah, operation, yeah,
Would
But
that be
that's
the
just
same
the
for the
treatment
SBR?
tanks, right?
yeah.
Right, that's, yeah, as we said earlier, you're
Yeah.
right,
So,
earlier in this meeting, let's say, that was described as treatment tank. I don't know.
Will the biggest difference be the cost in the people who are actually running the plant?
yes, and I know we talked about that, or somehow I had this, and that was the thing that really struck me. And the end of the last meeting, I remember we talked about it privately or whether it was in the meeting, but
Oh, yeah, I mean, you gotta go back, so 2016, it was 395,000. 2017 started there for the next 3 years, and basically averaged out to 274. And then it went, in 2020, after the spill, it switched to Infomart, went to 595, then 897, and current year 933.
Oh my gosh,
now,
That's what you say.
Yeah.
so it's,
And didn't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so if we can figure out a way to simplify the process so that we don't have the crazy system we have now. These are scientific terms that I'm using right now.
Yes, I noticed, recognize it.
I mean, from the way the Aqua Narita system has been characterized, it's a pretty straightforward plant that doesn't require special people that have to be brought in from another state.
I don't know that. You
Yeah,
guys may know that. I don't know that.
they have to be licensed. I mean, that,
But
but
it's-
they're the same,
Yeah.
but it's
I
the
don't-
number of employees would be fewer, the number of contractors.
Yeah,
I'd
so-
say.
it's supposed to be very automated, that's
That's
all I
what, right.
That's what they said,
Yes.
but that's what they
That's what they
said.
said about our plant.
But they,
and-
Did they?
and
Do
this
you know?
is Sludge being hauled, not.
I bet technology's changed so much that it is more automated than it was. Have you-
I mean,
you know?
everything in the world is more, no, I don't.
Right.
You know, I think that's lots
This
of
plant is not automated.
No, it's labor intensive.
But this plant also,
It's a private equity.
I mean, my understanding is
Could the existing plant be automated?
No,
the
you
filter,
you always need to have people there.
Yes.
That's a state requirement.
Yeah,
And
but
is that
the
gonna be-
number of,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, the number of people who are required, does the state require an operator or multiple operators?
It's multiple operators. They have, I think right now it was between 3 and 4 full-time. The difference is you gotta think is when you look at your books, the current situation is that's a professional contractual service, right? And if they were your employees, they don't necessarily need to be. I mean, they're wastewater operators, but they can be used in another capacity should you need it. See what I'm saying? Cause you.
But would that ever happen though? Would you ever use them in some other capacity?
Oh, yeah. It's so different than I have water, sewer and stormwater guys that I can use in any which way possible. In the same situation. If you need flaggers, you have people that can help with flagging. If you have a pump station go down, I can bring my water guys in to do the same work that my wastewater guys can do.
what's the,
Hmm.
why did it effectively double in 2020?
Earl, you can answer that question.
Because they could.
New contractor,
They got bought by private equity.
And the costs went up.
The original contractor was Severn Trent. Severn Trent then got replaced with Tidewater. Tidewater ran it, White Marsh technically. White Marsh ran it till 2020. After White Marsh, there was the move back to Infomart. Infomart is the firm that bought Severn Trent. And Infomart is a private equity firm that purchases smaller, could be startup or operators, and they add it to their portfolio.
If
And
you could
it's
if you bring in personal operators that we pay, they're us.
Yeah.
Our costs will go down.
Manager
But
calls
you gotta
that.
have the right.
So you said it's requirement to have an operator on site.
Right,
So is that gonna be a requirement no matter what plant?
it's a fixed cost.
So you're gonna
Yes,
have
you have to
the
have two
same
people At least.
2 people, no matter if it's small batch or Aqua Narita, you're gonna have those people on site.
It's, you have a project manager and then you have like a lead operator.
Okay, well then I think it's reasonable to say that we should be able to figure out what those costs would be. I mean, right, I mean, if you were to bring those people in-house, or if you were to hire out, contract out.
You could ask other towns,
Yeah.
you know,
We've
that are
done
on
that.
similar.
Yeah.
Okay, you
So-
know that, so.
Tell us the synopsis.
You can do it for less than $900,000.
Right,
Is it,
Right.
is it,
Half or is it 3/4?
okay, gotcha.
It's fair.
and that's with
How
them,
much?
I think you do it for.
right,
And that's no matter what facility is being run. Once it's new technology, it's relatively automated compared to what you have now and.
Yeah, I
would
mean,
be-
at the end of the day, it really comes down to, and you know, Earl and I have talked about this personally, is it comes down to. Do you want to be in the operations business or you don't? And if you're in the operations business, you're paying somebody to operate it, or you're paying, or you have your employees operate.
And does the city have a leaning towards what position they'd like to be in?
They used to operate it themselves, up until 2000. I want to say 2002 or 2003, and that's when Severn Trent was brought in. Severn Trent was there until 2016 when the RFP was put out. 2017 is when they lost the RFP. It went to low bidder, and that was time.
Okay, but so the current approach is to bid it out.
Yeah.
And do you think that's gonna be consistent, or do you think that could change?
It's a board
It's a
decision.
full president decision
Okay,
scheme.
all right,
So,
well, there has to be a political direction.
Yeah, of course. You're absolutely right, Donna.
so I assumed that the switch from in-house staff taking care of the plant and contractual services had more to do with the technology in the plant. You're saying that jump was made before the technology changed.
I believe,
Concurrently.
not being here, because I was in elementary school at the time. I believe that it was probably.
Oh, it's easier.
And there was the EPA filing.
Right, you said two thousand
It
and
was
two,
early 2000s.
right,
I
the
believe
storm clouds were on the horizon.
Yeah, I believe it was when Dan was still here, if my memory serves me correct.
Right, we were gonna have to change our discharge
Yeah,
characteristics.
the process, working with the EPA, which is not uncommon, that's actually what Whitefish did, same exact situation.
Yeah.
They worked with the EPA to come up with a solution. That was not a 1-2 year process. That happened over the course, I think, of like 4 or 5 years. So just like Whitefish, I believe, if I can remember, Barbara, if
Yeah.
you may, I think it was like 2009 is when they got their first. I'm gonna say NOV because I don't know the term, I'm just doing notice of violation, but I think it was around that time. And then they first started to do the bidding in 2016, 17, or 18.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when they
7
awarded the
years.
technology. And then they bid out the plant, which was based off what technology they selected, which is about green.
Right, and it seemed like, I haven't read through the whole long, really comprehensive document. But it seemed like part of the thing that's squeezing them is their population growth, the growth in the demand. In terms of the volume they have to treat and the permit limits that they need to reach. In this sort of what I'll call squeeze from Montana.
Yeah.
And EPA.
And I'll add the caveat is that, when you sit here and say you could do it for 50%, it's how you theoretically would allocate that time, because if some of those employees are operating in different departments, obviously it doesn't get allocated completely across. If you were to hire an entire team that would be dedicated to the wastewater treatment plant, which that's their every single day they're there and they're there for 24/7 or at least a working week, you're probably, if I had to throw an actual number out there, you're probably between 500,000 and 600,000. If you're including.
How many employees would that be, please?
It's probably between 4 and 5.
Okay,
I mean, you're obviously, I believe Aqua's probably gonna say you can do it with less. It's just a matter of how much redundancy do you want.
right.
But you're also paying them, right, in this process.
Who?
Right, there's the whole process of designing and building the
You're
hardware.
using their technology.
Correct.
Well, if they're an ongoing.
And then they
like a
train.
Lease agreement for usage, that's a really interesting point. I
We-
figure you pay for that upfront.
So- I'll
Design.
use Suez, for example. We actually, ever since everything that happened in 2020, where you have a operator that's managing the system, we now pay for a service annually that's, I think it's between 7,000 and 10,000. It's called Insight. So instead of relying upon the operator to provide you any details about what's going on operation wise, we actually get a report that's given to us bi-weekly that we pay for as an extra set of eyes viewing the system. So they see any irregularities, they send it to us.
But to Earl's point that he was just making, if I understand what you were just saying, you were talking
I
about.
wasn't saying it necessarily accurately, it's more a question.
So. That's a really, if I understand what your question was, it's is there a licensing fee on an annual basis
Let's just start with-
to use Aqua Narita
I would,
technology?
I wouldn't think so, but in today's day and age, you never.
Because I always
In the
assumed that part
past,
of,
when I have designed Aqua's SBRs, there were no licenses.
Right,
Okay,
yeah,
but it's been a while.
Yeah,
They
support.
they
may
get little
cost you.
bugs.
right, but they describe where they would train staff or train the
Right.
contractor and be available on call.
Mhm.
But it's really a handoff at that point in
That's right.
time,
They
is my
wouldn't
understanding.
want to charge extra because their competition would eat them alive. You know, Parks and the people that you saw at the other treat at Berlin. You know, they'd be doing all the SBRs if Aqua was asking for yearly stipend.
Sure, I see
So-
what you're saying.
so I'm gonna keep pushing
I
this.
remember when they said though, in one of the meetings that. They called us and we called them and we told them something was wrong. I remember this interaction of communication that made me wonder,
With Infomark?
no, with
No.
Narita, it made me wonder if it wasn't. Connected to a more long-term
It
relationship.
was the car wash upset.
They
They
turn
had a bunch
everything
of
red.
stuff and
Yeah,
Right,
what do we do about it? And at least Paula sounded like she had ongoing
right,
Right.
advisory
That was-
relationships.
Yeah, that was.
Well, but I mean,
Some of those.
and she,
I don't know if they were,
charging.
on
they were
contract,
better than phone friends, I'd say that.
well, my sense is that. Given how new this technology is, they've got to prove that they can work over the long haul. They're going to need to do those things.
And that's the reason you choose this company is because they will be there for you if you need them to answer questions. or
Right.
help.
Right.
You know, and that's what all of these companies tout. that we're there for you. We provide all this basic information. Your engineer turns it into concrete and dirt and when it's operating, if you got any questions at all, or something comes up, something breaks and it's still under warranty, et cetera, et cetera.
It's not gonna be a chatbot, it's gonna be an engineer on the other end of the line.
Yeah,
Paula,
So, given everything that's been banged around in the last half hour, I'm just curious how we move forward and where we're going. I imagine that eventually we need to try to put this in such a package that it can be compared and it can tickle the fancy of the Board of Public Works, the whole board. What's it gonna take to do that?
That's the question, isn't it? The spreadsheet was my start at rationalizing, what we have versus what our options are. But I think it needs more, and one of the things it needs is, I wish we had, specific electric use for different parts of our system, but we don't. The best we have is what we have at the bottom of the page from the, Whitefish.
I'm gonna make a suggestion about that, Barbara, if you
Yeah.
don't mind me jumping in here.
Okay.
I'm wondering if Austin or someone who works there, with the plant material, the pumps and so forth. You should be able to get a breakdown on the size of the pumps, the horsepower and so forth, and therefore be able to convert that to a kilowatt hour usage. And if you have a breakdown of all your components, that's calculable. You have that kind of,
It's just you'd have to go back and anytime you change the pump out, it'd be changed, from when it was
oh,
originally.
sure. And do you have that kind of record keeping here?
We probably do, but it's just going through and putting it all together.
Right, but anyway, I'm just suggesting there is a way of capturing that if anyone's interested. Sharon,
I'm tapped out.
So I'm just trying to make sense of the numbers that we're headed toward having here. Versus the big pile of numbers that are associated with the existing GHD report and evaluation. Because I'm assuming we're gonna be asked to compare this to that.
And the GHD of the report, I was looking for the numbers and couldn't find them, but I think that they predicted annual operating costs of around 2 million.
and I was just gonna add in there because it still assumes that you're contract operating.
And you're using an MBR,
And
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
include the chemical costs, correct?
Yeah.
yes.
Right. And that was one of the things, again, I mentioned this before, the people in Berlin stress how, Jim Bobowitz, that we move away from chemical dependencies
Yes.
for, right,
Well, it's clearly something that these guys have been marketing.
not manage the cost.
Dr. Rita guys, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and you've got the chemical costs on the spreadsheet.
Oh, yes, thank you. I
You're-
hadn't noticed that part of it,
If I were to try
the
and
actual costs, right?
generate a difference in cost, your sludge handling costs are the same. They're gonna be the same for this treatment plant, or, you know, plus or minus a small. Your manpower costs are gonna be less with a SBR or an operating.
Right,
You know, you don't need the same level of manpower. And you, when
It's
something
also
goes
manpower
wrong,
that's more available.
that's right, and you call upon workers that are doing the collection system or the pump stations to come in and help if some pump needs to be moved from here to there. But it doesn't take as many people as you have going that. It's just a simpler process. Your electricity is going to be similar.
I was just gonna add to that, is that one of the things, and this goes into kind of when you're dealing with. For example, Infomark's closest plant is Elkton, Maryland.
Okay.
So in that case, they have to retain staff that live here. It's not like they can mingle or intermingle staff, so you're paying for the essentially the fee associated with them and any sort of markup you have of it. And that's when you get into having somebody else run your plan, you're at the mercy of that.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, I would be a proponent if it were at all possible, is to hire your own personnel. And
Mhm.
get, I know you have excellent workers now that maybe need to pass a test and wastewater treatment, but you know, to get their license, so that type of thing, you can go out and hire someone that already have a license.
So we can develop that plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
That sounds
then,
like the
so
way to
sludge handling, and then there's electricity. Now, electric is gonna be similar,
Why do you
Yeah.
say similar?
well. Because the main power needs are for aeration and pumping. And you're still gonna need to lift the water into the tanks, and you're gonna need to lift it through the filters. And what these two types of treatment systems give you are the benefit of having the ability to control very specifically the amount of air being pumped into their system. And that's a lot of electricity, the blowers that it takes.
But
So,
when you look at line 27, it's dramatically different from the SVR to the Aquanita.
yeah,
What worries
and-
me is are the pluses.
Well, that's because it doesn't have the
Right,
headworks, it doesn't have the.
it's
Yeah, I
just,
don't
it's just,
know.
it's not
The
complete.
NAR has the
You can do a
filtration.
relative analysis of the columns.
If,
That's all I can do.
the radar includes effluent filtration. So
You could, yeah,
it strikes me that it's a very large difference that. And it's a
Well,
little bit surprising. to me.
Okay, if you even look at line 13,
Right,
now that's just talking a couple of treatment tanks.
yeah,
Is that,
if that's what it is, that is a substantial difference.
Yeah.
So,
If you look at
I'm surprised by it.
line 13, column C, that's, 45% or so of
Right.
what our plan is. Okay, there's other things to add to it, but if you look at line 13, column D, that's 10%.
Yeah.
So if that saving between the two is real.
And
if
they
it is,
claim 50 to 75% lower power use.
Is the thought to move the plant?
I was just gonna
Because
do that.
your money gets
when you go back, and I'm alluding to, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the board members here, this presentation, is that it really comes down to, are you trying to retrofit your existing facilities, or are you trying to relocate your facilities? Because that's the angle it's gonna be at, and it could be, you provide options, right? Because you said, through this process, we looked at, okay, we can retrofit, you can move, here's the example cost for moving. You move, you start to factor in decommissioning and any sort of regional pump station upgrades. But it kind of, you either pick one way or you give the option to.
The cheapest option is to stay where it is.
Yes.
That's the cheapest option.
Right.
That's where the pump stations run, that's where everything runs into.
And when you retrofit and use it in process, a lot, reuse a lot of stuff that's there.
Yeah.
So the trick is keeping it in the same place, but making it hard enough to withstand the floods.
So the question then becomes, you're looking at 5 millimeter or millimeters, or you're gonna bring 2 millimeters for the filters. We're looking at
It's the same
6.
thing.
For the
6
screens,
millimeters. So it's throwing more into the canal
And
than the current plant.
That's only head.
No, that's
only the- yeah, no, that's just the screening before the actual treatment.
Got it. Okay.
No, then you would go through a filter. Your discharge to the canal would be. You can't say it's gonna be as good as the membranes that you presently use. However, it's gonna be excellent.
Within the permit.
And it-
Fully accept.
certainly within permit.
Yeah.
And. The aqua neurota system and the SBR system, the both SBR system, but. They can be dialed to produce very, very high quality water, and then after that. You remove phosphorus, do that effluent equalization, and filter it. And
So because your IQ is about 80 points higher than mine, would you go with SBR or Narita?
well, I am
If you're-
familiar.
If you're gonna park it right
The
next to
thing
the
is,
plant.
I've designed 8 SBRs, I designed the first SBR system in the state of Pennsylvania. And that, how long ago? So I just know it better. It doesn't mean that it is better than Narita. The Narita system is extremely interesting to me. I just worry about how do you, as an operator, how do you get it started? What if there's some kind of mix up and you got to get it started over again? You get those granulars going, and they've responded to that with information, and it seems like it's in pretty good stead. I'm just not familiar with it.
It seems like that one of the strengths, at least from the conversation we had with those guys, Paula and crew, is the resiliency of the program, how quickly it bounces back from
Right.
some sort of a.
Right.
It is no secret.
And the batch reactor, the SBR has the same kind of situation. It's got to bounce back too, so. Any
there's
biological system, I think that's probably a toss-up, that concern of mine. I really. It's hard for me to say. I just know a lot more about batch reactors than I do from the Narita system, and I don't want to taint. Any recommendation or comments because of that. But the big bucks are gonna be the sludge, the electric, and the manpower. And so if the electric is better with the Narita, that helps. If you wanna really get rid of electric, get some solar panels on top of everything.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Really, it's a capital expenditure that would pay for itself
So,
in 5 years.
right. Yeah,
It would just make all there, and then sludge handling is sludge handling, and I've told you my story of 55% of the cost of running the treatment plant is sludge handling. Has everybody, you heard my story?
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, that's my favorite story.
55%.
I went to,
It's a big number.
I used to operate a treatment plant and tell everybody's getting converted. I used to
Talk
operate
just
a
like your
treatment plant,
children.
And I went around and I what are all the costs of handling sludge? The guys shoveling sludge off the beds and then putting it in things, running it through belt presses, trucking it to a land site and gardening it into the corn crop, and all those costs were 55% of my budget. So I get a chance to go to a Water Environment Federation conference up in Milwaukee. And in Milwaukee, they've got this massive sludge, it's a 400 million gallon per day treatment plant.
Organite.
They make mill-organite. And to make mill-organite, they have a gas well in the Gulf of Mexico that pumps gas to the dryers in Milwaukee. And that's the only reason for that gas well,
Wow.
to
All the
dry
way up
sludge
Mississippi.
in Milwaukee. So they can make mill-organite. And I was talking to the superintendent, I said, well, what's your budget on sludge handling? It's about 55% of mine. Well, exactly the same, so.
Well, okay, but so the.
Long story, sorry.
So in the negotiation or study with options in Sussex County, we have an option here that, you know, SBR or Narita, that looks like you could rebuild on that site.
I think you could.
You could probably. I'm a little in Sumner's camp. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm gonna try.
Are you saying that's what Sumner does?
He said he was doing that earlier.
I thought we were having a vote.
No disrespect to Sumner, but you could say. We can build a treatment plant on that site that's gonna last 30 years. And it's gonna cost less to operate. And it's gonna cost some upfront capital, so, you know, pick a number, whatever that is. Maybe that's $15 million there and $25 million across the river or something, across the. So let's say it's $15 million just for.
Okay.
And you're gonna save $300,000 in people. And something in electricity, I'm not so good on kilowatt hours per day times annual cost, but you know, you're gonna save a couple $100,000 more. And that's an alternative which you have. It's realistic. At the current site.
Are you gonna have to put a wall around the plant?
No,
I don't
I
think so.
don't believe so.
I think that was. A fiction. Created. For that study. To make it look really good, to make the other options look good.
Well,
I don't.
so my understanding on that point is that's, if I understand what the drying beds do, that's solids handling, right?
Right.
Yes.
And you have this contract with the county. That if you fully utilize that contract, would you need to have the drying beds?
Not necessarily, that's as long as the contract stays.
Right.
The contract.
Right, but the drying beds are the greatest. They have the greatest vulnerability in the GHD report.
One of, because the bottom of the digester building has electronics and stuff in it, the older building. But if you benchmark yourself, it's 9.5 feet. That's kind of like your, oh crap.
So if you rebuilt it, they'd be.
If you would rebuild to a different, that's why they basically said, we'll keep everything where it is. And instead of raising the equipment, if you were to rebuild, you're just raising, essentially building a dike around the entire place to cover you for not having equipment that would be theoretically where you would put in the.
How high are the walls on this process? In general?
24 feet.
Yeah, they're tall.
You're not
So
gonna.
you put it 6 feet into the ground and up on top, and then. I don't know. Like, you can build a deck over the top to put your buildings on, your labs, your
solar
your
panels.
Your
Yeah.
solar panels, your sludge handling equipment, if you wanted to put a press there. The thing that you want to consider though, is access to the site.
Mhm.
In high water. You still want to have good connection, and I would envision something coming off Kings Highway, you know, and coming across, like where the bike path comes into that area, or something like that, that's high enough for people to get to the plant, you know, during high water.
And that would be my biggest push for an alternative site.
Yeah,
So that would be,
just the access situation.
so
Yeah,
Mark,
because
which,
That's not gonna change, and
No.
I can tell you that I would put a lot of money on, you would be able to do it in an emergency situation, but if you were to go to the state and say, let's plan for this, they're gonna tell you to pack sand.
Yeah, you mean to come off the highway?
Yeah.
You come across the little wetland. that's
What's
right
the,
there.
wait a minute, why is
elevation of
that?
that, what's the elevation of that trail right now?
You're probably
The one right by the swing bridge.
the swing bridge,
probably 10 to 14 feet, depending on where you're at.
Well,
It comes up and
Yeah,
then goes
you're
back
right,
down and
you're
then comes back up.
right, there is a low area in that area.
There is,
So our magic
Right.
high water number
Because the
is
bridge is
just under 10 feet, is it? Is that correct? The elevation?
11.64.
Yeah.
Oh, 11.
right, Yeah,
So Mark, I think you were suggesting that that route that you were talking about coming from the Freeman Bridge towards the plant, you're talking about improving that it would be made a road in effect instead of a path. Right,
I
and
think
it's-
that would be,
But it's
That
subject
would be-
to.
I understand, but wait a second,
Indeed.
and you're talking about elevating that road bed also from where it
yes,
is
so
now.
that
Correct.
you'd have access, dry access at all times.
Correct. Now, Austin, why do you think Delta, DENREC, you said, who was a government agency?
technically, if you're going from that side, you would have two parties, you'd have DRBA and you would have Delta.
I think-
Okay, well. Can you imagine the DRBA would object to this? DRBA, would they have reason to object to this, like this proposal?
I will put it to you in this stance. If you ask DelDOT what roads they own and maintain,
Yeah,
it will depend on which day of the week it is.
I understand, but that road right now is privately owned.
DRBA.
DRBA owns it.
Which,
Now, the state does put their state route number on it.
and the
but-
state has influence in that road, just like on Freeman Highway. That agreement is a three-party agreement with DelDOT being a person involved, yet DelDOT doesn't own that road.
Right.
I know,
Does that-
put the swing bridge back.
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
What's the matter with having a boat?
Well, no, really, that's okay, but you have sludge handling that you need to truck in and out, and that could be pumped
Yeah,
to a discharge point. There are,
there's
That
solutions.
piece right there is, if you're talking about
Right.
an entrance that can accommodate that,
yeah, that's a big.
yeah.
put more
right.
money on that.
Well, I don't.
So,
think-
I mean,
I
what does
mean,
that
you're
look
talking
like?
about
We're
sea
talking about
level
having
rise,
a-
and you're talking about, but if you get a terrible storm coming in, that water is gonna come up, it's gonna be at, your benchmark of 11.55 feet. Because it didn't reach what we said, and it's gonna go down, and it's not gonna be there
Yeah,
a week later, I mean.
I think the biggest thing is if you were to ask me where I look at. The biggest issue of that plant, it's not gonna be from the presence of sea level rise, it's gonna be for that one storm that would
I was just gonna
come.
look it up. I think New
That
Jersey is doing
potentially-
it with 18 feet.
Yeah, it's the storm that would come that would potentially cause retreat.
That was sanity. That's
That-
not that.
It's
far.
not to say that that won't happen in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But I'm not of the opinion that it won't happen.
Right.
And that's the question, which everybody takes a risk. I mean, you go down to Charleston, I've showed you guys, Charleston sits out on an aisle
Yeah.
with one road in and out at elevation 0.
Mhm.
Did we,
Well, I mean, you're doing an awful lot. I mean, you could probably build a plant and be happy there for 30 years. And,
Then what do you do?
and then you gotta do something else, or you might have to do something.
So why,
Well,
why do that all to let go of it in 20 years, 30 years?
And that comes
And why
down
would-
to, because if you're gonna invest, mind you that you're talking about the scale of investment is you're gonna go to the state for funding. It just like we did on the last, one. You're either going to the state or you're going to the bond market. And so if you do that, you're looking at a 20 or 30-year loan. 9 chances out of 10 low interest. And so then you're gonna be, if the plan is, if you're looking at the long-term horizon of 30 years. Let's just say perfect world, you build and you have it done 2028, 2030. You're talking 2060 until the debt's serviced. So then you're past even the horizon of the GHD study.
And is that worth it for the volume increase to go from 1.5 to 2.1? I mean, do we not think that the demand will be even greater? And
That was our, when we said up with the water rising, that may decrease.
1.75.
Right,
And
and
now
we
we-
don't need such a big plant in 20.
In this scenario, they used what was used in 2008 as far as the bid spec is, that's why they did 2.1 with a max daily flow of 2.6.
so you think the demand will be less?
Less than less than 1.75.
Yeah, and I'll add the caveat, the reason.
I'm worried about the city though.
Well,
I'm
you
worried
could,
about the city.
in this,
Well,
well,
we
you
get to
could
20
build another
Why do you?
tank.
How-
yeah.
When you get to
I
2060.
want that question.
Okay, when you get,
Oh, that's right, if you like.
when you get to
You
2060,
guys keep putting buildings behind buildings,
ADUs.
and that adds EDUs.
Yeah, but you're suggesting that you're gonna have less.
No, I'm saying that's the worry, is that the city does more creative things. And we end up having more water, toilets, et cetera, et cetera.
So,
But
but
what
you
you're going
also
today.
have,
So you're gonna have more.
You'd have more, wouldn't you?
but
Yes, you would. I said, that's the part that worries me. And I'm the only one that's worried about it, but I'm the only one. on
But
the
I
board that's-
thought
I'm
You
with
just
you.
said you're having, we're gonna have less.
Less than, I think we will have less. But I said, but I worry about what the city does with their ordinances 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or
Let's-
30
So
years.
wait a minute, I'm not defending
yeah,
anyone
we
here. I just want
we
to-
had this conversation in the mitigation committee.
yeah, let's.
What, if you have to amortize this thing out to 2060. By the time we get to 2060. The landscape of Lewes may be starting to look a little different.
Yeah,
The number of EDUs down on the beach may be dropping.
I don't disagree with that.
right.
Yes.
So you gotta think that so the study that was done in 2015 by GMP meant 6,200 EDUs.
But now they can also raise their houses over there. So again, it gets down to what are the facts actually gonna be at any given date in the future, and you don't know.
So they used, and this is just a caveat, so they used 300 gallons per day. It's a very high number. From an engineer's perspective, 300 gallons per day is a fairly
That
high.
includes irrigation.
No,
It
that's
should.
for that's like a sewer.
Sewer
customer,
discharge.
the
Oh,
water.
I'm thinking water, sorry.
So really, most 10 state standards look at 250 gallons per day. You can run the analysis to see what that is. If you run it off of 250 gallons per day and you use the same amount of EDUs, you come in just under 1.7, I believe 1.7 something, which is why we use 1.75 as our floor. You also got to think that since we have the Sussex County agreements with all the interconnections, our service territory goes all the way out to Old Orchard. But with our agreement with Sussex County, there are different parcels of land that there are customers, but it goes through Sussex County system. Oyster Cove, you're gonna have a new medical building that's out there off of Old Orchard. There's gonna be a new senior living facility in the back of Old Orchard, potentially another one at the back of Old Orchard. Henlopen Bluff goes to Sussex County. Or will go to Sussex County.
Wait a minute, when you say that it goes to Sussex County. Please,
The flow goes to Sussex County system, but there are customers. If you look at White's Pond, same exact thing. That interconnection is with Sussex County. But there are
so
customers.
because it connects on that side of the valve, is that what you're saying?
No, it physically goes to Sussex County.
So the
It's-
flow physically goes to that.
Yes, there are customers, but we have a flow agreement with Sussex County where there are customers, it goes to Sussex County for treatment. We take flow from Sussex County in which we credit that because they're taking and treating our flow. We're treating their flow, so at the end of the day, we net it out at the end of the month. You following?
Yeah, I
So-
follow, but I
So
never
is
knew
that
that
growth,
this was.
that growth in Sussex County can,
It's growth in, so for example, Henlopen Bluff in city, White's Pond in city. Their flow goes to Sussex County.
You know, I
Be
raised,
hardwired to the county rather than to the city plumbing.
Correct.
but why, sitting in this meeting as a council person, and I'm familiar with the documentation that comes from BPW when a developer has made the pitch for approvals. And they've gotten a letter from the BPW saying that the BPW has no problem meeting the demands that this community represents. That detail of who's actually doing the treatment, I don't believe that's included in those kind of letters. And so I've thought, when I read those letters, and I read them every time a development plan comes in, and I read your text, I am under the impression that 100% of that wastewater is coming back into the city and going through the plant for treatment.
Isn't it better that
Am
it
I,
won't actually affect our, the amount, the demand on our system because it's actually going somewhere else?
You're still-
Isn't that what matters?
You're still treating.
but there,
Theoretically, that flow is coming back to you from Sussex County through the existing interconnection that you treat 500,000 gallons in the off season.
so in other words, you're doing a balance sheet adjustment at the end of each year, basically,
At the end of each month.
each month. So you're building credits or debits depending
Is
upon
there
what season
point
you're
to
in.
the level of inflow from Sussex County? Is there
You didn't.
It's capped 100,000. So summertime.
half a
versus-
million?
Yeah.
So ultimately, it will be,
You knew that.
That's
it will,
the-
You withheld that information.
as you bring,
You knew that.
as you bring more of these arrangements online, it squeezes what can ultimately come from Wolf Neck from outside the facility, just needs to be treated here because the
That's good. I think that's-
spring irrigation can't handle
Bring it
it.
up, right?
I've had this.
I mean, you've got a budget, right? It's a number,
I've had.
but as you add Hemlock and Bluffs and
Well,
so
when
on, it
I-
reduces
I-
what can come from elsewhere in the Wolf Neck
Because the
system and
back
come
house
here.
is bigger
Yeah,
than
it's under, it literally, if you
There's
look
two
at the
on the
flow
floor.
agreement with Sussex County, it spells out almost per parcel. What parcels go into
Well,
Sussex County
this is-
and what parcels does not. Antelope and Bluff, White's Pond.
And what's the flow rate for ED?
Or,
Can we get Sussex?
It's accessory dwelling.
It's 250.
No one ever asked me that
Yeah.
question.
So it's not based on. Bedrock.
All right, so
Penn State standard.
what are you gonna
It's
do?
based off.
You're
of
actually
Yes,
fine,
great.
It's in the
separate
agreement, it's
meter
200.
without any additional surcharge.
If you read
I
the
would- I would-
report,
I would-
getting
that-
back to
That's
our
city
agenda,
policy.
if you
That's
read the
kind of
report on the Idaho Springs wastewater treatment plant, that case study,
I'm
I
not sure.
think it's interesting that they looked at 5 different technologies.
What page you on? I'm sorry. I was
On
already
the
doing
first
it.
page, they looked at a number of technologies, SBR, modified Lutec Ettinger process,
This one.
integrated fixed film
Thank you.
process, membrane bioreactor, and aquanurita. And some of them were canceled because they couldn't handle the footprint, leaving just MBR and AGS as the options, AGS being aquanurita. And then they looked at AGS on page 2. Has a similar footprint to the MBR option and ability to retrofit. But the life cycle cost was much lower due to the reduction in energy use with the AGS system. Also, the MBR system required greater energy use and also membrane replacement within the 20-year operational window. So AGS was the best option. If you
Why
look
did
I
SBR?
think we can just
Not
renegotiate
make
with
it
the county. and have it
Too big.
Or flow.
footprint. If you look on this list, the
The
size of
builders
the tank
spending for that
are
and
considerably larger for an SBR.
Yeah,
But that place was highly
nobody-
constrained.
Well, that's not our job,
Higher.
right?
It's a steep slope
Look at
setup.
technologies and-
It's a very tight place for them, but
The other
We
thing
have
to look
agreed.
at is when you
And it's to
read,
look at technology, right?
right. That's my.
Sorry.
sorry,
Yeah, sorry.
when you read the project documents from Whitefish, I went down the wrong lane. I read the final preliminary design document, which was very long, and it was all about an SBR. That was what they were looking at putting in at Whitefish, SBR. And then when they got to the bidding process, Aquanurita bid as an SBR, but their technology, Aquanurita, they view it sort of as a type of SBR. And although the capital costs were a little bit higher. They felt that the smaller space, the huge, decrease in energy use and other reasons made them choose and go with the bid from Aqua and Rita instead of these other SBR. I think they were looking, I forget the company who gave the SBR bid. So I think you read through all that and it's all SBR stuff, and then you get to the bid award and it's Aqua and Rita.
But that hasn't been constructed yet. We don't have.
That has been.
Is there performance information? I didn't get that far in the
It
document.
was completed in 22.
So I guess the question that comes to mind. Is it actually operating at the level of efficiency that Aqua Narita sold? The pitch.
Good question.
How do we
No,
find that out?
that is
When you
not
go
on
to
their
the website, I bet it would tell you, wouldn't it?
No,
The website wouldn't contain that
You have
information.
to contact the operator and say, is
You'd
this
be in
real?
Colorado in a couple of days.
It's
Just 35 miles west of
Just
Denver.
just up the road.
Yeah.
Whitefish,
White-
Montana?
No, city of Idaho
Idaho
Springs,
Springs.
Oh, Idaho Springs.
Colorado.
You were talking about Whitefish.
Yeah, we jumped from Idaho Springs to White Village.
Just
Well,
Sorry.
Just wait. Yeah, I'm with you. I thought we were in Idaho Springs.
Yeah, because that's pretty, okay.
I've seen almost nothing bad about this technology,
Yeah. me
and I read
either.
a lot, I read it.
I agree.
But most of the
If Mark,
technology.
if Mark were comfortable with it,
Yeah,
I'd be, striking up the band.
but most of the documentation is from the seller.
Which
Yeah.
gives you.
Well, then we,
Except for the stuff on the Whitefish
right,
website.
Well,
start
let's
calling up.
hear what Idaho Springs, if they went operational a year ago, they should have some feedback.
Right,
They
start interviewing, right?
Yeah, I mean.
Can Austin just call them up?
Sure.
What
call.
Whitefish is the one that went
I do have.
a year ago.
Yeah.
Is that
performance-
Idaho
I know it's
Springs?
been underway for a while. They're
But
up
they're
and
not-
running.
They are.
Yeah, I think they've been running for a while. That's how that pink,
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah, yeah,
car
yeah.
wash.
pink water, the car wash thing, that was in Idaho Springs.
Okay.
They've been up and running for a while.
That's the one that's indoors.
Right.
You were gonna say something?
Can't remember.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So let me understand, our scope is to look at technology.
Look at options 1 and 2 and see whether the GHD numbers made sense, to see whether we could retrofit differently, to see whether we could bring down the O&M costs.
Okay, thank you. That is our scope.
Yes.
But I would go even broader because I'm an idiot. To suggest that. Maybe this technology is so good that not only should we potentially use it, but maybe the county should use it.
And maybe we should just give more of our flow to the county.
If they had the right technology.
They have the
And
right
because county's gonna
Right.
have the site, the county's going to have the trucking capabilities in and out.
Yep.
Without any impact from a storm. And so. But I just don't know politically where that is, but if it is such. But I mean, that would be a Hans question, right? Is Hans in favor of this new technology, or does he want to continue?
I don't think Hans wants to know about it. I think he wants to go with what he's
He
coming.
wants spray
That's
irrigation,
not
doesn't
it.
he?
That's
Everywhere.
Spray
not
irrigation,
really
spray
not the case.
irrigation is, I think the future of spray irrigation for him is.
Yeah.
Isn't clear.
Hans is, I mean, he basically, his preference without speaking for him is, he likes South Coastal. South Coastal is a plant that he's designed, he's got 20 years of data on,
Mhm.
20+ years of data on, and so he's comfortable, just as if Mark would say. He's built a lot of SBR plants, and he knows what our SBR plants can do. It's not to say it's the right or wrong thing, but that's what he knows, and he just did a very expensive renovation in which Barbara, you saw it, Earl saw it, and he probably would use the same contractor too. This contractor,
Yeah.
very,
So that's 100% ocean discharge.
South Coast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
10 MGD.
But I think the
Correct.
benefits of this team are looking at different technology
That's right.
that could benefit us, could potentially benefit them as well. Likewise, I think it gives us more of a bargaining chip to
Yeah.
say, you know, we also have an option.
Certainly. And it also.
It doesn't make sense to me to spend this kind of money for the increase in capacity that you're getting at a vulnerable location with a potential storm event. It just doesn't, but that's just me.
And that's, I will tell you that my argument would be is if you're investing the time and energy into it, you're dealt with two options, which is you look at a site that's much closer than what was in the GHD report. And you build a plant that would be owned and operated by the Board of Public Works, or you look at an option where the board is not involved in treatment.
Right, you're sending it.
Get
Because if you're taking debt service out, and I know Tim had said it because the headwork's taking out a 20-year loan. If you're taking out a 30-year loan and building a plan, the GHD report doesn't even make sense anymore in theory, because it ends at 2050. And you're talking about debt service that theoretically could be 2058 and beyond.
I mean, it's not like you're doubling your capacity here.
No,
No, you're
And
just replicating it.
Lowering your operating costs. And you're protecting
But
it from.
you're spending an awful lot of money for a very small.
Okay.
Well, you
gain
do a
as
present worth
capacity.
analysis to see which is the.
Yeah.
and you won't, I mean, what they did is they took. When Aqua did this, they took what was done in 2008 and built that. I don't necessarily think you would need 2.1 MGD. So our existing facility is theoretically built for 2.1 MGD, but you're capped on your biological process and your filters.
Right.
You can expand your filters, but I think your bottleneck would end up being your biological process.
Okay.
But that plant on paper can do 2.1. But it's not set up right now to do 2.1.
Is
This
it
is where
permitted for 2.1 with your MPDS?
No, permit's 1.5, so you'd have to adjust.
Okay,
it.
so the permit's 1.5, so you'd have to expand your MPDS permit.
But like others will say,
Is that
it
automatic?
says 1.5, but it's
No.
biological loading is the big focus.
Have they approved our permit?
Huh?
Have they approved our permit?
No, the response was sometime in 2024. Expired in October of 2023, but the department's overloaded, so they
Right.
said.
That
So
doesn't have to do with the quality of the
Yeah.
water,
How long
that's
did they last?
administrative, that's a pure administrative fact.
Some have time limits, some
I'm
are
more the
open.
forest when I think about what they're,
You're talking about the permit?
Oh, you think they're trying to push us out?
I think they're trying, have they done anybody's permit?
No, I will tell you.
You're talking about Genrec? Is this who the
Yeah,
party
Genrec.
is? Okay.
I personally think that it's probably being held to align with whatever the EPA does associated with PFAS. There you go. That's.
Oh,
that's
my
what-
gosh.
That's what I'm gonna say.
Oh, wow.
So the,
Because if you think about it, if you issue the permit, it's good for 5 years, so that means you're not gonna come back to it until 5 years.
right,
Or you wait and see what the
What's,
EPA passes.
what's that schedule? for
Or,
PFAS?
or they want to get water out of the canal.
Potentially, yeah, it's another option. I'm putting my hat on where I'm guessing. I have no
I'm
idea.
guessing too.
But it's just PFAS is
I
a
think-
huge push.
I think we ought to think back on Earl's ideas here, because if we put together an idea of what costs are for a system here, and the Narita system seems to be the least expensive. And look at operational costs with it, so you have a present worth analysis. And you say to the county, look, this is an extremely cost-effective method.
Mhm.
You ought to think about doing that if you're putting it at Wolf Neck, because we're paying part of the operational costs. We want something that is put together
Right.
correctly so that those operational costs are minimized.
Potentially,
That's potentially minimal.
potentially paying
Yes.
for operation. That
Oh,
contract.
I thought that was the deal.
It's all based on how that contract's.
It's all up in the air, it's
So
all.
however.
Oh,
that
yeah.
contract
Yeah,
isn't,
it's.
Well, last I heard that they said they were gonna pay for the construction costs and you would help based on however much.
On
flow
the
you're
The
giving.
devil will be in the details of whatever that
Yeah,
agreement
that's
is.
true. But if
both
that-
put the letters to the editor
If that
about
were the
that.
case, then you'd want those operational costs to be minimized.
Isn't Marge
It's in everybody's
representing
best
fairly
interest.
the proposal that was put before the public?
That was the GHD, but what I'm saying is, again. you can put whatever you want in that, it's gonna come down to the contract.
Right.
Of
The
course,
contract's gonna dictate it, so these, between Barbara and the rest of the board. However that's written,
but was it,
The
did the county,
GHD's report said that.
correct,
did the county help shape any part of the GHD report?
They wrote it.
They helped write, they helped fund it.
That's for lies.
They help, I know they paid, didn't they pay 50% of the cost?
percent of the original.
Okay, so again, did they, in contracting for that service from that consulting company, did they state what their requirements were? So that in fact, the contract, the recommendations from GHD would reflect the county's thinking?
It was, at that time, you didn't have a contract, so you had no idea what it was gonna look like.
I understand.
So they used what they knew, and what they knew was they had Rehoboth, right? So they used what Rehoboth looked like
Right,
to have that agreement, because nobody knew what that contract was gonna look like before you even have it.
I understand, but it was based on the premise probably that you were going to have the traditional wastewater treatment plant,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And GHD was not asked to explore new technologies?
Correct, that's exactly what Barbara had brought up.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because that does, just like you.
I mean,
said,
so
where you're going, Tim, is that report, if they go in a different direction,
right,
in which, like Mark had said, if we're involved with that operations cost, a reduction in the operations cost benefits not only us, it benefits the county.
of course, of course.
And that's why when you come into that agreement, the agreement should be shaped in a way in which the board says, this is a technology that we want to use.
Right. That's
Or
the
this is the
negotiation.
technology, or this is the technology we're willing to pay for.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Exactly
Yeah.
right.
If,
If you want us in, this is
You can use any technology you want,
as long as
but
it's like
we
this.
think the operating costs ought to look like this.
Yeah, that's another way of doing it.
Eliminate all
I
the-
Right.
I think that's what Rose said.
I see you go.
Oh,
Does anybody know
I am
what the
slow.
subject historical
Get it out of its current
results are?
location.
Or the
think I'm
archaeological
right?
dig that's this,
No.
anybody know?
without stating my opinion.
it's a state thing.
I think there's two options on the table.
So,
You're in the business or you're out of the business. If
But-
you're in the business, you invest it for beyond 2050.
That level of debt with that level of vulnerability. This makes no sense. That's just my take.
Yeah, you have to increase the debt to decrease the vulnerability, and it's not impossible to do, but it's.
Well, this level of debt for this level of benefit doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
In this size municipality.
So you could move across the river. We Plot mentioned. We have higher debt. Same operating cost,
No, well,
same
no,
same lower new operating.
right, yeah, you still gotta go, you gotta.
You gotta buy the land, you gotta.
Yeah,
But you could also use that property potentially for more than just a wastewater treatment facility, which is what Barbara and I discussed. Because if you needed to put an admin building, you could potentially put an admin building. All comes down to how you use the property.
How large is that piece of property?
3.64 acres,
so,
And what is the footprint for? this?
roughly 200 and. Say 250 feet by, what is it, 96 or 80? It's,
That's
that's
like-
that's the
for the
two,
tank, that's like 2/3
the
of an
two
acre,
tanks with the digester.
something like that,
So-
2/3 of an acre.
You can't fit it in like you were facing it. You would have to fit it in so that it would run parallel to, say Freeman Highway or the bike path.
Mhm.
But it's the property's 700 plus feet long.
You don't want to be a tenant of the city.
No, that's in general. I mean, that's talking about field staff too.
Yeah, Yeah.
So what's the take politically and has it ever been discussed, just sending it all to the county?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, that's option 3, 4.
I'm
not, am I? I am eliminating myself from further things.
We've already kicked you off the island.
No, I mean, they come up with, but those are traditional treatment facilities. And they have been modified by whatever they found in this architectural, archaeological survey. That means they can't do their preferred.
The preferred was basically man-made wetlands.
Was constructed wetlands
Well, he
on
was
the
also
site
gonna
of the
irrigate.
irrigation facility.
Yeah, it's gonna
But
be-
drip.
yeah,
Drip irrigation.
plus discharge on outgoing tide instead of the field storm.
Right.
And they can't do that,
So if you,
but we don't know why.
You're saying the constructed wetland, the three, or that's 3B?
yeah, that's the.
3A is
potential
still a
that's-
possibility, though.
Yeah, you could pipe it back to the canal, same spot where it is today. Under that.
Subject to the current MPDS permit.
Correct,
Although if you change the process,
But you would
I'm
have-
sorry, this is not, I worked in EPA, but I did not work in MPDS.
you would
section.
relinquish that permit under that scenario.
Does it
yourself.
require re-evaluating
Potentially.
the possibly changing the parameters for the permit? If you change the technology, could it change the parameters for the permit? I'm assuming it would.
I don't know. I think the permit is for the discharge point,
Yeah.
so I don't think they're looking at how you get to the discharge point. They're looking at the discharge point.
Ah,
It's kind of interesting when you look at the stuff that's in here. Is ammonia one of our
interesting.
permit limits?
Yes,
I'm sure it is.
I'd have to.
Yes, it is.
Everything.
And we're
Is-
that,
are there
we're
any
in the
different permit
town.
limits
that
in
put
the,
it out
in
there.
say, the whitefish thing and what we have?
oh, I don't, I haven't studied.
I don't know where they're discharged.
They're discharging to a freshwater stream.
The ammonia limits are usually
You do too. I do.
low
So,
and almost
I
all
guess somebody will let me know when the
discharge.
next meeting is.
I mean, you're gonna be.
There's was like 9 or
Find
10.
out.
Total nitrogen is a different matter, but ammonia is fairly straightforward to get rid of. And It's not hard to,
That was,
How do you get rid of it?
but
What do
with
you?
the microorganisms and the narrative system of the
Yeah.
SBR or the existing plant you have, they start chewing on ammonia right away, oxidizing, it, but then they turn it into citrate and nitrate. That's harder to remove. That takes the machinations of turning the air off and settling and all of that business that you've been hearing about. Because that anaerobic or anoxic capability is necessary to get rid of the nitrite. the nitrate.
So,
I'm sorry.
no, I'm just realizing that Donna's about to leave and we haven't set the date for our next meeting.
Ah,
You have to give a presentation in January, right?
End of January. Yes. So we need to meet and please read the stuff on whitefish for the next meeting if you haven't already.
It's talking to you.
And Austin, I don't know if you might have the time or the inclination to contact the people at Whitefish to see whether they're getting what they hope they got out of.
I can do exactly what I did with,
Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah, try.
Sure.
Or we could delegate to the other people.
Yes, anybody wanna volunteer? Either Whitefish or the, what's the other one?
Go ahead, Mark is
Montana
excited, he
place.
likes it, look, he's excited.
What's your last name?
See you.
Mark is the best because he knows what questions.
Yes.
Yeah, little I don't even know the answer.
That's
You
required,
already have this.
is that not really?
No, we don't.
Oh, you talk to people.
You're cold calling.
Yeah.
Hi, of course.
Yeah.
My experience is there's a guy there who loves to talk. He's about this square.
Let's go.
Hey, may I have y'all's
Go
attention
ahead.
for a minute? I received a question from Daphne.
Okay.
Quintavilla, and she's asked, does anyone there know how we would handle the PFAS requirement? And then she goes on to say, I realize it's adding a variable. It sounds like an inevitable future issue, and the initial design may be the place to plan for that.
Can you factor it in right now in any
Technology.
design, technology choice, budget, if it's gonna happen?
Right.
If you want.
And frankly, we have reason, that's another reason to push back on the county, because their technology might not address PFAS, would it? With their, you know.
I don't think any wastewater treatment plant as of today probably would be plans designed to have like whitefish probably doesn't have.
Right.
A lot of people, I will,
It's a good-
if I can find it, I'm gonna send it out. There was a video, actually, it's on YouTube. Tim shared one on the water side, but there was one on wastewater. And it's a big discussion topic because in Michigan, obviously you have automobile manufacturers and you have plastics that are created for those automobiles. And there's a town that went through a situation where they found a company that was discharging PFAS and nobody picked it up. And then it went to the biosolids, and then all these farmers took the biosolids and spread it out.
That's
Farms.
the place where
They
you
call that beneficial
Yeah.
use.
No, it's not, the stream discharge is not the big issue, it's the biosolids and where it will accumulate.
And that particular farm ended up losing their entire livelihood and their entire stock of cattle.
Yeah, I designed
Wow.
two.
You mean losing 'cause
two
they
water
died?
treat-
The federal government killed them.
Because
They were exposed to
contaminated-
something.
They contaminated the
It was
field.
beef
and
cattle. He was selling beef cattle that was contaminated with PFAS.
I designed a couple of water plants to remove PFOA and on the Ohio River downstream from the DuPont factory. And there's a very specific carbon that they
December
create
11th.
for carbon removal.
The interesting part is that with the regulations that theoretically are gonna come down the pipe
That's
for water.
that's mayor and city
I can see
council
happen with
that night.
wastewater.
What
One of
was
the
that?
questions I was asked.
December
at the-
11th.
That's
I was asked
Mayor City
was,
Council. meeting.
okay, if
What
the
time?
regulation moves forward,
It starts
all these
6:30.
utilities that have to remove it. It's considered
Do something at
contaminated
one?
or high hazard. chemical.
That's a long day.
We just hope
Okay.
you-
That's a long day.
No, that's
Sometimes they last till 10 o'clock.
How about the 13th?
Donna, take care.
Thank you.
The record will show she's leaving early.
I can do the 13th.
And there's.
I'm not
nobody really on the-
17, 16,
No.
You're out of town.
Algon
And I'm
provides a
not
very
in
specific
internet range.
Oh,
Sorry.
enjoy.
carbon.
Yeah, what does that
removal.
feel like?
Yeah.
And they will this is going
13th
back
says
10 years,
me and Austin.
they would take the
And Earl
carbon
said
back
he's
and
gonna-
regenerate it. So they would burn. it.
December 13th.
Mhm.
I'm out of town, but I
Been
can
doing that with
likely.
sludge.
You'll
log
see.
in.
Losing
Yeah,
proposition.
yeah.
It was,
On the 13th,
I
you
was-
said?
Yeah,
I think, what time, please?
what time's
I
good
was
for you?
shocked.
Let's do it early.
Yeah, earlier.
documentary.
Yeah, 1.
Because the crazy part is that like that particular homeowner.
And if somebody could come up with an idea of what to do with the
Lost their
wastewater
entire
treatment,
livelihood, but the company
to make water,
who was doing the discharging.
What do you say?
is
I think
doing
we-
business
I have an
with
idea.
cooperating.
potable water out of the wastewater treatment.
It's.
Given the
I-
technology, what it's really designed for,
Yeah,
I'm not so
There.
Next meeting's December 13th at 1 o'clock.
Okay,
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, the
did
13th.
you already check my stuff?
Yep.
Yeah.
December 13th.
She's good.
Yeah.
Did you check my thing?
I don't have your calendar.
Well. yeah. And we're gonna meet here again, right?
Yes.
Unless you're hosting.
I don't remember.
We can use your
It will
office.
be
and
a-
Yeah, we
there's
do.
candies. These are sweet.
Okay.
And we're gonna call this all to PG.
And if anyone can add anything to the spreadsheet, this will be sent. Do you have you'll send it electronically?
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
And did you remember sending that to Daphne? Please,
Yes.
thank you.
yeah,
Daphne, that's a completely, seems to me kind of a game changing question right there.
yes. Yes,
It really is.
I mean, it sounds like from
Your
what,
sheet. Can I have your sheets that I need back?
so everything but I would love to keep that report at the end of the blue section that was the SBR.
yeah, the
It's got- we can keep
That one you can keep.
But the rest of the blue ones we need back.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, Mike didn't answer me.
I'm gonna keep them. And so if we need to bring them back out for the next meeting,
Am I giving you what you need? Do you need?
and if
one
he
too?
says otherwise, then yep,
You need
Okay.
one?
thank you.
This is ours, right? This.
Yep, that's us.
Yeah.
This is ours.
13th, 1 o'clock here, right?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, Merry Christmas. That's yours.
Karen, thank you for all of the documents that have been coming through.
Thank you, sir.
Hmm,
Uh,
okay,
This is the One-
Yep, I need that one.
Is that the only one?
Nope, and there's 3 more.
So
You need the
often,
whole
Oh, God.
I haven't,
What do they look
I
like?
haven't read through the whole Whitefish document, but just reading
Mm-hmm.
through the first bunch of pages.
Yes.
At first,
Use one of them?
one of the things that was sort of interesting was, their numbers that they had for their demographics. Basically, what would calculate out as an EDU demand.
Your wife loves all
They
this
seemed
stuff.
like they had a population that was twice as many people
You should see my house, it's just.
compared to
Wow.
Lewes, and yet they were dealing.
Why is it we're having to go out?
Water.
Because
Why
Aqua
is it-
Narita sent them over and the
Could
one
be.
page has confidential on it.
Yeah.
And because they
Think
didn't
about it.
specify whether or not it
Again,
changed all the documents, our lawyer said, you know, better err on the side of caution.
Are we gonna check to see if we can get any of those back?
Yep,
Yes, but
but I'll save them for next time, so I can pass them back out if you want.
We have real data that showed that
Are
compared
you
to
gonna
those
join us at
rentals,
March
are we
tomorrow, or?
shooting ourselves in the foot by sticking, I mean,
so
Yeah,
you
no,
gotta
no,
think of
no.
it from,
That's not
it's
gonna-
so tough trying to shoot that
Oh,
because
you
obviously
never
we're looking
had
at property.
I
that
do
is
have.
technically in the
He
county.
could.
So it can
He could,
develop
but I
under
don't
county
want
rules and
to
regulations, which could change. Their densities are different, et cetera.
but I'm back at, I've been thinking the whole time about girls' worries about EDUs and backyards and yada yada.
Here.
You're everywhere.
my
It's
place
just
living over at
from
the
you want
beach.
yours.
And what's it called, short-term rentals?
Yeah, it's a commercial.
Heads in
use.
beds,
Correct.
we're greatly concentrating people in houses, which will affect the volumes coming from each house. No matter how many more
Definitely
houses.
fogging out.
Just take the flow. I mean,
Okay.
if we're only treating everything.
Thanks, Daphne.
The county.
Okay.
flow,
Thank you.
Okay.
you're